Hello everybody, and welcome back to Chills by Angel. I hope you're all doing well today. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm really glad you found your way here. Today's story is one of those cases that stays with you long after you've heard it. It's disturbing. It's heartbreaking. And honestly, it's hard to believe it even happened. Because what you're about to hear didn't take place in some remote jungle or behind the walls of a hidden compound. It happened in the middle of a normal neighborhood, on a busy street, in a regular house, in London. What happens next is difficult, but it's important, because this case isn't just about a cult, it's about power, control, and what can happen when one person is allowed to dominate the lives of others for decades, without anyone noticing. It's also the story of a little girl who was born into captivity, raised in total isolation, and told her entire life that the outside world would kill her if she ever tried to escape. And the most chilling part? She was trapped there for 30 years. Before we go any further, I do want to give a quick heads up. This case involves serious abuse, coercive control, and violence, and some viewers may find it upsetting. Please take care of yourself while watching, and feel free to step away if you need to. Alright, let's get into it. So today, we're talking about a cult, and I know that word gets thrown around a lot online. But this one genuinely earns the title. Because this wasn't a group hiding in the wilderness. It wasn't some secret compound in the middle of nowhere. This was a cult operating for over 30 years. In the middle of London. One of the busiest cities in the world. In a normal house, on a normal street, with normal neighbors living right next door. And somehow, no one realized what was really going on inside. This cult is most commonly known as the Workers' Institute Group. They didn't have robes. They didn't chant in the street. They didn't build a visible following. They just existed, quietly, behind closed doors. And what makes this case so unsettling is that 3 women were held captive inside that house for decades. One of them had been there since she was a baby. Let that sink in for a second. A child, born into a cult, who never went to school, never had friends, never played outside, and didn't even know the real world existed. The man behind all of this was named Aravindan Balakrishnan, and he is, honestly, every cult leader stereotype rolled into one. Egotistical, controlling, manipulative, paranoid, and completely convinced he was the most important person on the planet. Balakrishnan was born in India in 1940 and later moved to Singapore as a child. He was described as very intelligent, and that's important, because he used that intelligence later, not to build something good, but to control people. From a young age, he was told by his mother that he was special, that he had unusual abilities, that something otherworldly surrounded him. Which, let's be honest, is not exactly a healthy thing to tell a child. But those ideas stuck, and they grew. By the time he reached his early 20s, Balakrishnan arrived in the UK on a scholarship to study in London. And this is where things really start to go off the rails. He became obsessed with politics, with power, with the idea that the UK government was secretly evil and out to get him. According to him, Britain was turning into what he called a fascist state, and of course, only he had the solution. He joined student political groups, activist organizations, radical movements. And here's the thing. Even those groups, the already extreme ones, thought he was too extreme. Which, honestly, tells you everything you need to know. And this is where we see a classic cult leader pattern start to form. He tries to take over existing organizations, fails, gets pushed out, and then thinks, fine, I'll start my own. So that's exactly what he did. He created a group called the Workers' Institute, and at first it didn't look that strange. He gathered about 20 to 25 followers, mostly young people, mostly university students, people who were idealistic, disillusioned, looking for purpose, looking for someone to tell them how the world really works. And Balakrishnan saw that vulnerability and went straight for it. The group handed out leaflets, gave speeches, tried to recruit more people, and then they all moved into a building together in Brixton. And this is where it stopped being a political group and started becoming a cult. Everyone lived together. They slept on the floor. They followed his rules. And of course, he didn't follow his own. He banned relationships between members, except for himself. Because apparently, the rules only applied to everyone else. And this is just the beginning. Because over the next few years, that small group of followers would become prisoners. And one little girl would be born into it. And her name would later become Katie Morgan-Davies. And this is where the real nightmare starts. So by this point, Bala has his group, he has his followers, and he has a growing obsession with control. And honestly, this is where things start getting really dark. Throughout the late 1960s and 1970s, Bala and his group were very active out in public. They handed out leaflets, they gave speeches, they tried to recruit people on the streets, and they weren't exactly subtle about it. They were aggressive, argumentative, confrontational. They picked fights with anyone who disagreed with them. And eventually, this behavior caught up with Bala. There was one incident that honestly still makes my jaw drop. A neighbor was having a small party. Nothing crazy, just a bit too loud for Bala's liking. So Bala stormed into the neighbor's house, holding a large kitchen blade. And he tried to seriously injure a man who was standing on the stairs. Let that sink in. Over noise. The man managed to move in time and avoided being seriously hurt. But the fact Bala did it at all is absolutely terrifying. And this is where I start asking real questions. How was this not the moment everything stopped? Bala was arrested, and he was sent to prison for 2 months. 2 months. I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous. After he was released, he was worse than before. More paranoid, more angry, more extreme. He became convinced the British state was now personally targeting him. He was arrested again not long after that for more violent and disruptive behavior. And again, he only served a short sentence. And while he was in court being sentenced, he wasn't even listening. He was chanting slogans about revolution, about the destruction of the state, about victory over his enemies, which, honestly, tells you exactly how detached from reality he already was. And this is the turning point. This is the moment Bala decides he's done with the outside world. He tells his followers the state is coming for them, that they're in danger, that they're being hunted, and the only way to survive is to disappear. He tells them they need to cut off all contact with family and friends. No calls, no visits, no letters. He tells them they need to leave the house as little as possible, and when they do, they have to be watched. And this is where something really important happens. A lot of people leave. A lot of his original followers hear this and go, "Yeah, no, I'm out." Which, honestly, fair. But Bala still isn't alone. He still has a small group of loyal followers. And every single one of them is a woman. There were 8 women in total who stayed, including his wife, Chanda. Yes, he had a wife. Which somehow makes everything that comes next even worse. One of the other women was Chanda's sister, and honestly, I don't think she was there by choice. The others were women Bala had recruited at university, young, intelligent, idealistic. Most of them were in their early 20s when they met him, and all of them were at a vulnerable point in their lives. Lost, disillusioned, looking for meaning, looking for someone to tell them what their life was supposed to be about. And Bala saw that vulnerability and exploited it. They all packed up their lives. They left their families, their friends, their careers, and they moved into a house in Brixton with him. And just like that, they disappeared. No outside contact, no escape plan, no safety net, completely under his control. And this is when the cult truly begins, because from this moment on, Bala isn't just a political extremist anymore. He becomes a captor, and his followers become prisoners. So now the group is isolated, cut off from family, cut off from friends, cut off from the outside world. And Bala finally has what he's always wanted: total control. At first, life inside the house didn't seem that extreme. There were rules, sure, structure, schedules. But slowly, very slowly, those rules started getting tighter. He controlled when they slept, when they ate, when they spoke, when they were allowed to rest. And over time, even what they were allowed to think. And this is how cults really work. Not all at once. You don't wake up one day and suddenly believe something ridiculous. It happens in tiny steps, so small you barely notice them happening. First, he tells them the outside world is dangerous, then that the government is evil, then that everyone outside the house is an enemy, then that only he can protect them. And by the time he reaches the truly unbelievable stuff, they're already trapped. And this is when Bala's ego goes fully off the rails. He starts telling them he has special powers, that he can control events, that he can control people's minds, that he can control the weather. And somehow, they believe him. Because at this point, he is their entire world. He tells them he is immortal, that he is responsible for major events in world history, wars, scientific breakthroughs, even the moon landing. Yes, the moon landing. He literally claimed he caused it. And honestly, I don't think even he fully believed all of this at first. I think he just kept saying bigger and bigger nonsense to see how far he could push them. And every time they didn't challenge him, he pushed further. Until finally, he dropped the big one. He told them he was God. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. He told them he was the ruler of the world. And I wish I was exaggerating. He said he ruled in secret because the British state was trying to destroy him, which, conveniently, explained why no one else knew he ruled the world. How very convenient. And somehow, they still believed him. And here's where it gets even stranger. Bala told them he had an invisible assistant, a powerful machine, an all-knowing system, called Jackie. Jackie wasn't a person, it was an acronym. Jehovah, Allah, Christ, Krishna, Immortal, East, Warren. Yes, he made that up too. All of it. He told them Jackie could do anything. Turn lights on and off, control appliances, or kill someone instantly. Destroy a country. Cause disasters. All with a single command from him. And of course, only he could control Jackie. Because why wouldn't he be the only one? And this is the part that people always ask about. How could anyone believe this? And here's the answer. Because by now, they had no outside reference point. No internet, no TV, no newspapers, no family. No one to reality check anything he said. He controlled their sleep, their food, their fear. And fear changes your brain. When someone controls everything about your life, they eventually control what feels real. And Bala knew exactly what he was doing. Because now, he wasn't just their leader anymore. He was their God, their protector, and their executioner. And this is the mindset he needed them in for what he was about to do next. So by this point, Bala isn't just controlling their minds anymore. He starts controlling their bodies too. And this is where the story takes a truly horrific turn. Around this time, Bala's wife Chanda became seriously ill. So ill that she had to be hospitalized. Which meant Bala was now living in a house with 7 other women, and his wife was gone. And honestly, we all know where this is going. Because just like so many other cult leaders before him, Bala decided the rules no longer applied to him. He began forcing the women to take part in sexual acts with him. These acts were not consensual. They were the result of fear, threats, and total psychological control. He told them that if they refused, Jackie would punish them, that he could harm them or kill them. And by this point, they believed him. Every single one of those women was being abused, repeatedly. And he made it even more disturbing. He created a schedule, an actual rota, so each woman knew exactly what day and what time she would be abused. Which honestly adds another level of cruelty to this whole thing. Imagine living in a house, counting down the hours, knowing what was coming, and being powerless to stop it. And even when Chanda eventually came home from hospital, it didn't stop. Of course it didn't. Bala would just find excuses to send her out of the house so he could continue abusing the others. Which is wildly hypocritical, considering he used to preach that no one was allowed to leave the house. Rules for everyone else, not for him. This went on for years. One of the women later said she was abused weekly for 6 years straight. And the only reason they didn't fight back or run was because they genuinely believed he could kill them with a single thought. That Jackie would destroy them if they disobeyed. And this is the part that really makes my blood boil. He didn't just abuse them. He made them believe they were choosing it. That it was their duty. That it proved how devoted they were. Which is just sick. And it was because of this abuse that one of the women became pregnant. That woman was Shan. And that baby was Katie. Katie was born into captivity, into fear, into total control. And what Bala decided to do next is honestly one of the most disturbing parts of this entire case. He created something he called Project Prem, which already sounds unhinged. He decided Katie would be raised in complete isolation. No affection, no comfort, no normal human bonding. So she would remain pure and safe from the outside world. She wasn't told who her parents were, even though Bala and Shan both knew the truth. Everyone else in the house knew the truth too. But no one was allowed to tell her. Instead, she was told Jackie had brought her into the world, which is just unreal. Katie wasn't allowed to be hugged, comforted, or soothed when she cried. She was literally ignored as a baby. And if she cried too much, Bala would punish her physically. A baby. Because she genuinely believed she would drop dead the second her foot touched the pavement. And this is the part that just destroys me. Katie didn't know anything else. This wasn't abuse to her. This was normal. This was just life. She thought every child grew up like this. She thought every house worked like this. She thought fear was just part of being alive. And that is genuinely heartbreaking. And remember, she was being raised with Bala as her only real influence, her only authority figure, her only source of truth. So everything she believed about the world came from him. And that made her the perfect victim. And this is what Bala wanted all along. So by this point, Bala had total psychological control over everyone in that house. And now he moved on to something even more extreme, total behavioral control. Because life inside that house wasn't just strict, it was militarized. Every single part of their day was controlled by him, and I mean everything. When they woke up, when they ate, when they spoke, when they rested, when they showered, when they slept. Nothing happened unless Bala allowed it. Every single day started with Bala's lectures. And when I say lectures, I mean long, rambling monologues about himself, about his power, about his greatness, about how he was God. The women and Katie were forced to stand the entire time. They had to maintain eye contact with him constantly. If anyone looked away, if anyone blinked too long, if anyone shifted their weight, if anyone sat down, they were punished, usually with physical violence. And then came the chanting. They were forced to recite his so-called truths over and over again. Bala is God, God is Bala. Bala is knowledge, knowledge is Bala. Every single day, over and over and over again. And if that's not textbook brainwashing, I don't know what is. Then there were the house rules. And honestly, these rules were completely unhinged. There was a strict chore rota, strict meal times, strict sleep times. Meals had to be eaten in total silence. No talking, no eye contact, no expression. And of course, Bala always ate first. Because apparently even food had to respect his authority. Even naps were scheduled. Every afternoon, everyone had to lie down and rest, not because they were tired, but because Bala was taking a nap, so everyone else had to nap too. And this next detail still makes me laugh in disbelief. Even his showers were ritualized. One of the women had to turn the shower on for him. That was considered a great honor. Then after he finished, someone else had to turn it off for him. I'm sorry, but what kind of grown man can't turn on his own shower? The ego on this man was genuinely unreal. And it somehow still gets worse. 2 dates every year were treated like holy days: the 16th of July, his birthday, and the 16th of October, the day he claimed he was conceived. Yes, the day of his conception. That was also a celebration day. Every single morning, the group had to stand together and sing songs praising Bala. Songs that he had written himself, about how amazing he was, about how powerful he was, about how lucky they were to be in his presence. I genuinely don't think I've ever seen a bigger ego in any case I've covered. And of course, all of this was enforced with violence. Slaps and punches were a daily occurrence. Not rare, daily. People were beaten for tiny things: breaking eye contact, speaking without permission, sitting down without being told, complimenting each other. Yes, complimenting each other. One woman once told another woman she liked her hair, and Bala beat them both. Let that sink in, and Katie saw all of this, every day. She regularly saw the women bleeding from their noses and ears, bruised, shaking, terrified. And this was just normal life inside the house. But what made it even worse is that the rules weren't even consistent. They changed constantly. Something that was allowed yesterday could get you beaten today, which meant everyone lived in constant fear, because you never knew if you were about to break a rule that didn't even exist yet. And here's one of the darkest parts. Bala created an environment where the women turned on each other. They were all desperate to avoid punishment. They were all desperate to be his favorite. So they started reporting each other, snitching, pointing fingers, blaming each other for tiny mistakes, because if Bala was angry at someone else, he wasn't angry at you. So not only did they live in fear of Bala, they also lived in fear of each other. And tragically, Katie wasn't protected from any of this, even though she was a child. She was punished even more harshly than the adults. She wasn't allowed to giggle. She wasn't allowed to daydream. She wasn't allowed to fantasize. She wasn't allowed to run. She wasn't allowed to play. She wasn't even allowed to look too happy, because happiness, according to Bala, made her disloyal. If Katie broke any of these rules, she was beaten, sometimes with objects, sometimes with his bare hands, and he would keep going until his hands were bruised. Then he would look at Katie and say, "Look what you made me do," which is straight out of the abuser's handbook. And the most heartbreaking part? The person who reported Katie the most was Shan, her own mother. Shan would stand there and watch Bala beat her daughter after she had turned her in. There was even one incident where Shan forced Katie to eat her own sick as punishment. And I honestly don't even know how to process that. Katie had no idea Shan was her mother. She just thought Shan was the cruelest person in the house. And out of everyone in the cult, Katie hated Shan the most. Which is just another layer of tragedy in an already horrific story. And this was Katie's life, every single day, from the moment she was born. No love, no safety, no freedom, no childhood. And somehow, it still gets worse. So as if everything we've already covered wasn't bad enough, Bala still wasn't done with Katie. Because controlling her behavior wasn't enough. He needed to control her thoughts. And more importantly, he needed to control her fear. From the moment Katie was old enough to understand words, Bala began filling her head with lies about the outside world. He told her that everyone outside that house was an enemy, that they were all members of what he called the British state. And according to him, The British state wanted her dead. Not captured, not questioned. Dead. So from a very young age, Katie genuinely believed she was a high-priority target. That strangers weren't just strangers, they were agents sent to find her, to kidnap her, to kill her. And Bala didn't just say this once or twice, he repeated it constantly, every day, over and over again, until it became her reality. He told her that if she ever tried to escape, Jackie would punish her, that she would die instantly. Not slowly, not painfully, instantly. And then he added an even more terrifying lie. He told her that if she ever stepped outside the front door, she would suffer what he called spontaneous human combustion, meaning she would literally burst into flames and die on the spot. I know how insane that sounds. I know none of us believe that. But Katie was a child. She had never seen the outside world. She had no reference point, no internet, no TV, no school, no friends, no other adults telling her anything different. So of course she believed him. And to make sure that fear really stuck, he backed it up with proof. Katie was told that if she ever went near a window, enemies would see her. That if she ever looked outside, someone would notice her and come for her. So she was banned from standing near windows, banned from looking outside, banned from touching the curtains. She was told that if she ever picked up the telephone, the enemy would be on the other end. That they would send electronic waves through the phone to unalive her. So she was absolutely terrified of phones. And then there was the garden. On very rare occasions, Katie was allowed into the back garden, always supervised, never alone. And one day, when Katie was about 3 years old, a child from the house next door saw her in the garden. The neighbor child did what kids do. They waved at her, just a normal, innocent wave. Before Katie could even respond, 2 of the women ran outside, grabbed her, and dragged her back into the house. And once she was inside, they told her that child was a member of the British state, that the child had been sent by their evil grandparents to capture and kill her. I need you to really think about that. She was 3 years old. From that moment on, Katie was never left alone again, ever. She had someone with her 24 hours a day. If she went to the bathroom, someone stood there. If she showered, someone stood there. If she slept, someone slept next to her. And she was never allowed into the garden again, not once. She was told that if she ever went near the front door, she would die. If she ever looked out the windows, she would be seen. If she ever spoke to a stranger, they would unalive her. So she lived in a constant state of terror, every single day. And this fear wasn't theoretical. Bala made it physical. There was one absolutely horrific incident when Katie was just 4 years old. She became sick. She kept being physically unwell, and Bala told her to meditate, to focus on him, to think about him healing her. Obviously, that didn't work, because she was actually ill. And because she didn't get better, Bala became furious. He dragged her through the house, he threw her on the floor near the front door, and he attacked her, a 4-year-old child. And then he did the unthinkable. He opened the front door and threw her outside. He shut the door behind her. Katie had never been outside alone before, not ever. She went into a full panic. She thought she was about to die. She thought enemies were coming for her. She thought Jackie was going to kill her. She was screaming, crying, struggling to breathe, so weak she could barely stand. But somehow, she forced herself back up and started pounding on the front door, begging to be let back inside. And after what must have felt like forever, Bala finally opened the door. He let her back in. And then he told her he was showing her mercy, that he was forgiving her, that she should be grateful he saved her life. He made her apologize for being sick. I don't even know how to describe how evil that is. From that day on, Katie never questioned him again. She never tried to escape. She never even went near the front door, because he had successfully done exactly what he wanted to do. He had conditioned her to believe that the outside world meant death, and that he was the only thing keeping her alive. And this is the psychological prison Katie was trapped inside. So for years, life inside that house continued exactly like this. Fear, violence, total control. But eventually, cracks started to form. And the first cracks came from the women themselves. One of the women in the collective, Leanne, was the first to try and leave. One day she stood up and told Bala she was leaving. As you can probably guess, that did not go down well. Bala ordered the other women to hold her down while he attacked her. Afterwards, Leanne was badly injured. But even that didn't stop her. She still wanted out. Not long after that, Leanne managed to escape the house. She made it all the way from London to Southampton, but by the time she got there, she was completely lost. She had spent years in the cult. She had no money, no support, no idea how to survive in the real world. So heartbreakingly, she called Bala. She apologized, and she begged him to take her back. And he did. She stayed another year, before finally escaping again in 1989, and this time, she never returned. A few years later, another woman escaped. Her name was Cindy. Cindy had been beaten so badly over the years that she had lost hearing in one ear. One day, she decided she couldn't take it anymore, and she escaped. And just like Leanne, she never came back. And this is when something important shifted. For the first time, the women who were still trapped inside the house started to question Bala's so-called powers, because he had spent years telling them that if anyone tried to escape, Jackie would kill them. But now, 2 women had escaped, and nothing had happened to them. They were alive. They weren't struck down, they weren't killed, they weren't punished by Jackie. And that planted doubt. And then, things took an even darker turn. One of the women, Shan, finally started questioning Bala directly. By this point, years of abuse and control had taken their toll. She began noticing the contradictions in everything he said, and one day, she asked him a simple question. If you're immortal, if you're God, why are you aging? And that was it. Huge arguments broke out between Bala and Shan. Violence escalated. At one point, Katie found Shan tied up, hands bound, feet bound, gagged. Bala claimed she had tried to escape. Then things went quiet for a while. Too quiet. And then one day, Katie heard screaming coming from the back garden. She ran outside, and she found Shan lying on the concrete. She had fallen from an upstairs bathroom window. Her neck was broken. There was blood coming from her head. Bala told someone to call an ambulance, and then he said something that still gives me chills. Don't touch her. It might be used as evidence. Someone might say we pushed her. I'm sorry, but who says that? Shan was taken to hospital. Doctors saved her life, but she was paralyzed from the neck down. She stayed in hospital for months, and this is when Katie discovered something that changed everything. She found her birth certificate, and on it said Shan was her mother. Bala told her it was fake, that it was planted by the British state. But Katie was 14 years old now. She wasn't a little child anymore, and she didn't believe him. She was allowed to visit Shan in hospital, and when it was time to leave, Katie quietly said, "Bye-bye, Mummy." Shan's entire expression changed, and she replied, "Bye-bye, baby." That was the first time Katie had ever felt real love. 5 days later, Shan fell into a coma, and she passed away. Police investigated her fall, but because so much time had passed, they couldn't prove whether she jumped or was pushed. So her death was ruled an accident. And I'm just going to say it, I do not believe that was an accident. The timing, the arguments, the restraints, the fall, and that comment about evidence, none of it sits right with me. And heartbreakingly, it didn't stop there. A few years later, another woman in the cult collapsed in the kitchen. She hit her head badly. She begged to see a doctor. Bala refused. The next day, she died from a stroke. No police investigation, no charges. 2 women dead, both under Bala's control, both denied help, and somehow still no accountability. But by now, the cult was no longer airtight. Doubt had crept in, fear was cracking, and Bala's godlike image was starting to collapse. And this is what finally set the stage for Katie to try and escape. By the time Shan died, something inside Katie had changed. She was 14 years old, and for the first time in her life, she knew for a fact that Bala had been lying to her. She now knew Shan had been her mother. She now knew her entire life had been built on lies. And once that realization hit, there was no going back. As Katie got older, she started questioning everything. And one thing that quietly saved her sanity was reading. Reading became her only escape, her only way to imagine a world outside those 4 walls, her only way to realize that life wasn't supposed to look like this. When she was in her early 20s, she finally decided she had to get out, no matter what Bala had told her, no matter how terrified she was. So one day, she ran. She managed to slip out of the house through the back door, and for the first time in her life, she was outside. She was absolutely terrified. She had no idea where she was, no idea what to do, no idea how the real world worked. She eventually found a police station, but when she got there, she didn't know how to explain what had happened to her. She didn't even want Bala to get in trouble. She just wanted to be free. So all she said was, "I've run away from home." And heartbreakingly, the police called Bala. He came and collected her, and within hours, she was back in that house. That failed escape destroyed her. She fell into a deep depression. She believed she had proven Bala right, that the outside world really was impossible, that she really couldn't survive on her own, and she stayed trapped there for another 8 years. But something unexpected happened during those 8 years. Bala loosened his control slightly, not out of kindness, but because he was scared she might run again. She wasn't watched 24/7 anymore. She still wasn't allowed to leave the house. She still had to follow all the rules, but she had tiny pockets of privacy. And during that time, she met a man who lived next door. His name was Roddy. They started secretly communicating through letters, passed through the window, and eventually, she started sneaking him into her bedroom at night. And for the first time in her entire life, Katie experienced love, real love, companionship, kindness, choice. She finally felt like she had something to live for. And then she became pregnant. She was overjoyed. She believed this baby was her way out, her chance at a real life. But one night, Bala caught Roddy in her room. He threatened to kill him if he ever came back. And after Roddy left, Bala attacked Katie so badly that she lost the baby. And I'm just going to say it plainly. That man killed her unborn child. That moment broke her. Any hope she had left was gone. But somehow, she survived it. And deep down, she knew if she didn't escape, she was going to die in that house. And this time, she wasn't going to fail. By 2013, Katie was 30 years old, and somehow, she was still trapped in that house, still living under Bala's control, still following the same rules, still terrified of the outside world. But this time, something different happened. Bala gave the group a new privilege. They were allowed to watch television. One day, Katie and one of the other women, Josie, were watching the news, and a number appeared on the screen. It was a domestic abuse helpline. By this point, Katie was seriously ill. She had undiagnosed diabetes. She was losing a dangerous amount of weight. She was weak, and she was scared she was going to die. She begged Josie to remember the number and to call it. And for once, Josie agreed. When the call handlers heard what was happening inside that house, that women were being held captive, that one of them had been trapped since birth, they knew this was serious. They contacted the police, and police acted fast. Officers went to the house, and in 2013, after more than 30 years, Katie was finally taken out of that building, along with Josie, and the last remaining woman in the cult, Aisha. They were placed into protective custody, and Bala was finally arrested. When the story broke in the media, people were stunned. A cult had been operating for decades, on a busy street in the middle of London. 3 women had been held captive, one of them since she was a baby. The case went to trial. Former members Leanne and Cindy testified about the abuse, about the control, about the fear. And Katie took the stand. She had to describe her entire life. 30 years of captivity, isolation, violence, brainwashing. She was terrified no one would believe her, because the story sounded unreal. But the jury did believe her. Bala was found guilty of false imprisonment, child cruelty, multiple counts of sexual assault. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison. The suspicious deaths of Shan and the other woman were never prosecuted. No charges were brought. And I'm just going to say this plainly. Regardless of what the courts decided, he was responsible for both of those deaths. If Shan hadn't been trapped in that house, she wouldn't have fallen from that window. If the other woman had been allowed medical care, she likely wouldn't have died from a stroke. So no, he was never held fully accountable. Not really. After the rescue, Katie had to learn how to live from scratch. At 30 years old, she didn't know how to cross a road alone. She didn't know how to shop. She didn't know how to cook. She didn't know how to manage money. The people helping her said she had the emotional development of a child, because her childhood had been stolen. But here's the part that matters most. She rebuilt her life. She got an education. She went to university. She reconnected with her biological grandmother. For the first time in her life, she had real family. She learned how to live independently. She moved into her own flat. And she chose her own name. Katie Morgan-Davies. She later wrote a book about her life in the cult, to make sure this never happens to someone else in silence. And in 2022, Bala died in prison. He never showed remorse. He never took responsibility. He never apologized. But Katie survived him. After everything he did to her, he still didn't get to take her future. And that is how this story ends. So that is the end of today's case. And honestly, thank you so much for staying with me all the way through this one. I know this was a heavy story, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to Katie's story and to honor what she went through. If you found this case important or moving in any way, please consider giving the video a like. It really does help support the channel and helps more people find these stories. I'd also genuinely love to hear your thoughts on this case. What do you think about Bala? Do you think the suspicious death should have been investigated further? And how do you feel about the sentence he received? Let me know your opinions in the comments. I always read them, and I really value what you all have to say. And if you're not already following or subscribed, you're more than welcome to join the Chills by Angel community. I post new cases regularly, and I'd love to have you here. Thank you again for watching and for supporting the channel. Take care, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys!